let's get started. So quick intro, my name is Joe Formica. I'm the design advocate here at Lyssna. Basically, I've been a senior product designer, researcher for 10 plus years, and I've been teaching stuff related to product design and UX research for almost as long. And in my time working in product design research, I've worked on lots and lots of projects, done lots of screener surveys, made a lot of mistakes with screener surveys early on. As with all workshops, I'm going to be bringing that experience in, bringing in some examples, and hopefully helping you learn from some of the things I learned the hard way years ago. You can skip that part and do it the right way, going right into your research and the stuff that you're working on. In terms of this workshop and just about any workshop that I'm teaching, my goal is for you guys to leave here today with some real tangible skills and some confidence to improve your day-to-day work. I used to and still do attend a lot of panels, webinars, stuff like this. And I remember early on in my career as a product designer and researcher, there would be a lot of these, meetups, panels, webinars, etc., that I would leave feeling like I know more, I have more information, more stuff stored in my brain, but wasn't really sure how to put it into action or didn't really know what to do with it, let's say, when I came back to the stuff that I was working on every day. And I think there's some room for that for sure, but the way I like to teach and the stuff I want to bring you is practical, giving you that confidence and really hopefully making those connections to the research that you're doing, the stuff that you're working on, and giving you that confidence to put it into action today, tomorrow, whenever it comes on your plate. So the two big questions that I'll ask you at the end of the workshop to see how I did today. Number one, did you enjoy the workshop? You guys are taking an hour out of your day to come sit and listen to me talk about screener surveys. I want to make sure it's as enjoyable, comfortable as possible. And more importantly, do you feel like a better, more confident designer, researcher, product person after leaving this than you did an hour ago at this point? So I'll ask those at the end, see how we did. But that's me, and that's what I create all these workshops for, and create them with the goal of hoping that you get out of each one of them. All right, so some quick tips for getting the most out of our workshop. Like I mentioned, everything is recorded. So you guys are going to get the recording of this workshop. I put the slides in the chat. I'll share those as well. But everything from the workshop is either already here or I'll share with you during or after the workshop. So you'll be able to come back to that if you have to hop off early, if you got to leave for a couple minutes to put out a fire and answer some emails. You'll have all this material in your inbox, so you can come back and check it out, review this stuff, and use it when you're going to do your own screener surveys. Second thing, we're going to keep the chat open and active. You guys have already done a great job of that. If you have questions, especially since we have a relatively small group here today, drop your questions in the chat. I'm going to try to get to them, as many questions as I can, and put them in when you have questions. If I can't get to them immediately, I'll mark them, put them in the Q&A section, and hopefully find a minute or two to either have a little checkpoint or a little break where I can answer them. I'm also going to be asking you guys some questions, throwing out some discussions out to the group, some little mini activities that we're going to be doing. So that'll all happen through the chat. So keep it open. Don't be shy to contribute. Stay comfortable, hydrated, and happy. We're only here for an hour, but make sure you got some water. Make sure you're good, hopefully in a quiet, prone to concentration environment. And of course, if there's anything I can do to make it more comfortable or make a better experience for you here today, just let me know. All right, our last setup thing before we get going here is a little FigJam template that I created for you guys. We're going to be using this throughout the workshop today. I'm going to direct you back to it now and again for a couple quick exercises that we're going to be doing. But I think more importantly, it's going to be something for you guys to carry after the workshop and refer back to as something you can use when you're creating your own screener surveys. So go ahead and click that link that I just put in the chat, and you should see what's up here on my screen. This is the companion template to this workshop. If you have this open, just click this button. If you're logged into Figma, open in FigJam. Do it to my team here. And that will create, hopefully, yes, a duplicate, your own copy of this FigJam template. I'll go through this and I'll walk through each of the steps. I know there's a lot here, but for right now, just make a copy of it and keep it open. We'll be referring back to this later. Basically, it's a template and it's going to have everything from the workshop today, along with some other resources, some spaces for activity and stuff like that. So we'll be covering, I'll walk you through everything, but for now, just hit that link in the chat, click open in FigJam, and keep that copy open. We'll come back to it in a little bit. Let's see. I'm going to give everyone a minute to do that. I see we got 19 people who did. If you're not logged into Figma, if you don't have that open, if you can't do it right now, no problem. I'll be sending this out later as well. Can still totally follow along with the workshop, but it will help if you have it both for during the workshop and after. Looks like we got 20 people. Nice. Cool. If anyone has any issues with that, let me know and I can help you get that sorted out as well. All right, cool. Let me check that one more time, make sure we're all good here. Nice. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's get into what you guys are all here for today. We're talking about screener surveys. We're going to start with a little intro here, and then we're going to get into the title of the workshop, Screener Survey Mistakes, and more importantly, how to fix them, how to correct them, and how to drastically improve not only your recruitment, but your research in general for whatever your next study is. Let's start out though with a little overview here. So screener surveys, I guess I could even back up a step further, but screener surveys are a couple questions that we're asking as a means of recruiting people for a certain research initiative. We're going to cover an example throughout today's workshop and improve that screener survey. But the idea is that we want to run some usability tests. We want to run some interviews. We need people. We need participants to do that. And most likely, we want participants who fit certain criteria. If we're looking to create an app for a parent or a website for parents to find educational toys or books for their toddlers, and we want to do some research on that, we probably want to talk to parents of toddlers or parents of toddlers who have recently shopped or tried to buy educational toys for them. So our screener surveys are our first layer of and our kickoff of research and figuring out who we want to talk to, who we want to take feedback from, and ultimately who we want to make product decisions based off of. So why do screener surveys matter? They have a huge impact, like I said, as a kickoff to your research, a huge downstream impact on the research you're doing, the feedback that you're getting, and the stuff that's factoring in to those product decisions that you're making, the needs that you're hearing, the behaviors, the pain points. All of that comes from research, but all of that research comes from people. And ultimately, screener surveys are the main way or one of the most effective ways to pick those people and choose who you want to hear from and what experiences you want to learn about. Now, I love talking about screener surveys, weirdly enough, because they're one of those things in UX research that is, I think, often overlooked and something that, the difference between a good screener survey, if you showed this to my mom, let's say, who's not well-versed in UX research, she's going to see a good screener survey and a bad screener survey. They're going to look pretty similar. It's going to be a few questions about the person, their experience, and their, let's say, background or context related to the topic. But in reality, they could be very different and have a huge impact on the research. So the details matter big time with screener surveys. And that's what we're going to cover here today. First, by talking about the kind of downstream effect of it, and more importantly, looking at some of those little tweaks that can make a really huge difference. Why screener surveys matter? A few missteps or mistakes can lead to a lot of bad stuff, for lack of a better word, going forward in your research. If you're not going through the details of your screener survey or making some of the mistakes that we're going to talk about, That's going to lead to recruiting the wrong participants for your interview. That might lead to getting unreliable or conflicting feedback. That's going to lead to synthesis sessions where you and your team are racking your brains trying to figure out why there's such a maybe different opinion about something. And ultimately, it's going to be leading to bad product decisions or uncertain product decisions rather than being able to look at your research and say, hey, we did the work. Here's what people want. Here's the need that they have. Let's build something for them, and being able to do that confidently. And the ripple effect or the downstream effect, as I mentioned, you talk to the wrong people, you get unclear, misleading feedback, you make product decisions on that, you waste time, money, and also lose stakeholder trust. You can be doing great research. You can have awesome interview questions prepared. You can be doing everything right. But if the way that you're sourcing participants or the screener survey being a tool for that, if that's broken, that's going to lead to everything else breaking down after, and a lot of headache and confusion when really our research should be leading to clarity, understanding, and empathy towards our users. Okay, so here's the scenario that we're going to be walking through. It's called Run Buddy, a fictional running app. We're going to take on the role of researchers at Run Buddy. Let's say it's an app that helps runners track progress and train effectively. So if any of you guys out there use, I don't know, Nike Run or MyFitnessPal or anything like that, think of it as like a simplified version of that. Our team, as the researchers product team for Run Buddy, we're working on a new feature designed for people training for their first marathon. This is something my wife was doing about a year ago right now, and the inspiration for the workshop today, and all the challenges that come up with deciding, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to commit to running a marathon. What do I do next? How do I train effectively? And how do I actually get to, literally and figuratively, the finish line? So in this scenario, we're planning interviews. As the research team, we want to talk to people and we want to learn more about that experience of training and preparing for the first marathon run. So our interview goal is to learn about the psychological, physical challenges faced by first-time marathon runners or trainers during their training process and how these challenges impact their preparation and race day performance. And if you want to take it a step further, maybe the goal is that we want to create a feature that is a specific training program in our app for people who have decided they want to run a marathon for the first time. And in order to figure out what that should look like and what's going to be the most helpful, we need to talk to these people. So we're saying that we want to conduct interviews, but even taking a step back from that, we got to start with our screener survey. We got to find the right people to interview, to get those insights from, and to learn about those challenges and needs that come along with training for your first marathon. Okay, so if you guys want to head over to the FigJam, or you could just look at my screen, honestly, totally nothing to do interactively here. We've got a screener survey example over here. We've also got one over here. This is our improved one. Don't peek at this one too much because this is going to have some of the improvements that we're going to talk through step by step, but I wanted to include it in the FigJam for you to check out. But we have a screener survey right here, and this is basically going to be our starting point for finding participants for our first-time marathon interviews. And I will tell you that this is not the worst screener survey ever made, but it is not as good as it could be. And it would lead to a lot of those examples and those mistakes or missteps down the road that I just mentioned. So the goal here is going to be to walk through some of these common mistakes, take a look at this screener survey example, the one that we're going to use to find our interview participants, and correct it, improve it, and identify some of these mistakes that can really throw you off when you're looking for people, looking to screen people for your interviews. Okay, so we're going to come back to that and start improving it. But let's look at the 3 big screener mistakes that we're going to cover today. First one, we're going to look at no clear target. Second one too many questions. 3, vague or confusing questions. There are other mistakes outside of these ones that you can make in a screener survey that can definitely throw off your recruitment. And I'll just share here. There are a bunch of articles down below in this FigJam, but this one here is an even further deep dive. I'll put this into the chat here. And a couple of those other articles will dive even deeper. But these ones that I've highlighted here, no clear target, too many questions, vague or confusing questions. These are the big ones. These are the ones, the mistakes that I've made plenty of times, that I've seen when I've reviewed other people's research studies and screener surveys, and the mistakes that I've seen get glossed over and lead to a lot of trouble, or let's say confusion down the road. So we're going to cover these, look at some examples, and correct them together. Let's start with the first one, no clear target. A screener survey is meant to screen in and out the people that you want to talk to. In our case, the people that we want to learn from about their experience related to their experience training for a marathon for the first time. So in order to create those screener questions, we have to have a clear idea of who should be in and who should be out. That sounds and is obvious, but this is where a lot of screener surveys go wrong. You start writing questions, you start maybe brainstorming all of these things that could qualify or disqualify someone from participating in the interview. Maybe if that's collaborative, you and your team have different ideas of who should be able to participate in the interview and whose feedback you want to make those product decisions on. There are a lot of factors that can go into it, but the simple fact is that if you're creating a screener survey to qualify or disqualify people from your research study, you need to know and be on the same page about what qualities or what experience or characteristics you're looking for. A persona could be it is a good starting point for this. And there are some other ways, but I'll get to an even simpler one in just a second. If you're unclear about who you actually want to talk to, your screener isn't going to help you find them. Again, pretty obvious, but worth mentioning, because a lot of times it can be, like I said, collaborative, different opinions, old personas, all these other factors that can come into play that make it more difficult than it seems, or maybe more prone to error than it might seem, to tie those screener questions to the actual people that you want to talk to. So the biggest and best way to fix this is to create an includes or an excludes list. This is something that you can do in addition to a lightweight or a even robust persona, or you can just do on your own. I called it an includes excludes list. You could call it a qualify disqualify list. But the idea here is to even strip down a persona even further and just get it down to a couple bullet points. Who should be included in this study? What characteristics? And which ones should disqualify someone from being a part of this study? The key thing with your includes or excludes list, and we're going to see this as we go into some of the questions, is that every question in our screener survey, everything we do after this, we should be able to link back to our includes, excludes criteria. It's going to be our foundation for our screener survey, and it's going to allow us to cut unnecessary questions. It's going to allow us to ask better screener survey questions that really target the things that we care about without any of the extra fluff or extra questions that we'll get into that can derail or bloat, let's say, a screener survey. We're just coming over here to our example in FigJam. We have our scenario here. We're researchers at RunBuddy, and we want to conduct some interviews to learn about the needs and goals and challenges of people preparing to run their first marathon. Here's my includes and excludes list. We want to include participants who have trained for or completed their first marathon within the past 2 years. And we want to talk to people who've primarily trained independently, maybe not as part of a structured club or with a professional like running coach or trainer. We want to exclude participants who have had previous marathon experience. Obviously, if we're trying to learn about that first time marathon training experience, we want to target people who have recent memory or close proximity to that experience. And we want to exclude people, basing off of this point, who've received professional coaching or trained as part of a more structured running club. Let me throw this out there to you guys in the chat, and I'll give you a minute to answer. Is there anything that you would want to add to this, either in the include or the exclude participants? There's no right or wrong answers to this, but I want to just get you guys thinking about it, because this is how we would work as a research team, right? Maybe I would come up with it, or one of us would come up with this as our starting point, put it out there to the group, and then have that brainstorm of, what if someone did XYZ? Would we want to talk to them? Or should we include or exclude someone who has this experience? So let me give everyone a minute here. Check out what's in here and drop it in the chat. Is there any other criteria we would want to either use to include or exclude someone from our study? And if you're not sure, drop it in the chat anyway. The whole point of this is to discuss it, talk through it together, and see what we come up with. So I'll leave this up for a minute. All right, Chelsea said, exclude survey scammers, robots. Definitely. Yes, agreed. And I'll say, while everyone else is thinking about this, Chelsea, at Lyssna, for participant recruitment, we want to, panel quality is one of the most important things. Like when we talk as a team at Lyssna, the quality of people who are participating in an interview screening is super important. That's like first line is getting no like spam, any accounts like that. Second is actually the quality of people, finding people who are really meet that target criteria. So absolutely, right? We want to make sure that whether it's like technical boundaries, restrictions, screening, or the survey itself, that we want to have real people with real experience about training for a marathon for their first time. Absolutely. Does it matter if they have previously used apps to help them in this way? That is a great question to bring up, Gary. So I would say we can decide on that together. I would say that my thought would be they should be included if they have. Now, you might have a different opinion, but the reason I'm putting that out there is because we can change this, right? We can discuss it as a team. We might put this screener out there, get some interviews back. Let's say, Kira, we wanted to block or disqualify anyone who's used an app or MyFitnessPal or something like that to train. And then we put our screener out there and we're like, wow, we're not getting a lot of responses for this, or almost everyone we're disqualifying them because they've used an app before. Hey, does it really matter if they've used an app before? If all we really care about is if they've had like professional guidance or a coach, does it really matter? Maybe we could loosen up that screener survey a little bit. So to give a straight answer on it right now, my opinion would be, let's include people who've done that, as long as they haven't been part of a structured or like professional running team or coach. Even if they've used apps and stuff in the past, that's good. We could learn from that experience. And I would say the pros probably outweigh the cons there for people that have used an app. Yeah, I would agree with that, Kiri. I would say, yeah, we would want that because we would want to hear about their experience with it. If that's what we're trying to build, if we're trying to build an app or a digital program to help people train for their marathon, it's probably going to be really helpful to hear about other things that they've used in the past. And for that reason, I would want them to qualify for it. But more important than the answer or the final decision that we would make now, this is the exact type of discussion you would want to have when creating this criteria, and something you would want to put out there with your team to get ideas like that, Carrie, to discuss them weigh the pros and cons and say, okay, let's start it with this, let's try it, and let's see what comes back. And then we can decide if we want to tighten up that criteria or loosen it up as we go forward. Okay, so let's say maybe exclude people who run for fun without the goal to complete a marathon. Definitely, right? We want to find people who, so I would say, Alexander, I agree with you for sure. I would say that would qualify in here, right? They've trained or completed their first marathon within the past 2 years. I would say that probably covers the criteria that you have there. But overall, yes, agree. We want to find people. There's a lot of runners in the world, and those who are training for their first marathon and those who are just running for fun or to get in shape or for enjoyment, they're going to have very different needs and behaviors. So agree. Let's see. Michael said, are we targeting a specific segment, maybe age 18 to 45? I'm coming right back to that one, Michael. Keep that in mind. That's going to be in our next section here. Nice. Close family, friends that will support them. So I think I'm going to get to this in our third one, Becky. My question back to you would be, and take a minute to think about this, but what would we include or exclude? So if someone said, yes, I have close friends and family supporting me, that would include them in the study. That would screen them in. If they said, no, we didn't, and that would screen them out, what would that change about why would that change their eligibility to be part of these interviews? I don't know the answer to that. I'm just putting it out there to get your thoughts on it. It's not the first thing that jumps out to me, but I also am trying to think through it on the spot here. So main thing with all these questions, thinking about, is this going to affect the feedback that we're getting and considering for product features? I'll look for your answer or thoughts on that. And I think we're going to cover something pretty close to that in our third section here, Becky. Okay, so nice job with that. And thank you guys for putting all your answers in the chat. Those are really good. That's the discussion I was hoping to have, right? Seeing kind of a first draft of our includes, excludes, talking through it a little bit. We'd probably take longer if we were really the Run Buddy research team going through everything. But being able to discuss that, throw ideas out there, and evaluate what's really the bare minimum criteria that we want to include that is going to allow us to screen effectively for this study. So what I have right here, while it might not be perfect, and I think there's some good ideas in the chat worth considering, it's a good start for us. And more importantly, what I want you guys to see is that it's something we can come back to and we will refer back to as our anchor for everything that we do going forward with our screeners. All right, so let's get to our next mistake. Too many questions. This is one of the biggest, and it's got a couple different flavors that I'll talk through and we'll look through with our Fig Jam. But one of the most common mistakes with the screener survey is to try to pack too much in there. So with a screener survey, a screener is not a full survey. Surveys are a tool, a research method that we can use to collect data about our audience, our participants. It's a way that we can use surveys in general as a way to gather insights about them. But a screener survey is not that, right? A screener survey is just a filter. So the idea is we're not collecting data that we're going to use to inform our design decisions, things that we're going to use to guide us towards certain needs or pain points. It's really just a filter and a screener, and we want to treat it like that. And a lot of times when I see screeners get overloaded, it's because they're packing too much into it and bleeding into that territory of research, when really we want to look at it strictly as a tool to get the right people in for the actual research, for the interview, for the usability study. So a good benchmark for a screener survey is 3 to 5 questions max. On Lyssna, you're only allowed 4 screener questions for a study, which I think is great. I think you could have a lot of successful screener surveys that have 2 questions, 1 question, and still be effective, or actually be more effective to get the right people in. There are a lot of problems with having too many questions, and I'll cover some of them. But one of the biggest ones is pretty simple, right? Friction, fatigue, drop off. If you have 15 screener survey questions, people are, among other things, people are going to drop off. They're not going to finish it. It's going to make your recruitment process more complicated. And it's not going to have that desired result of finding the right people to do the actual interview with and the actual research with. Okay, so here's some common culprits of too many questions. First one is demographics, and maybe I would say just in case questions. If we come over here to and again, you can just look at my screen for this one, our Run Buddy study example here. We have age, marital status, household income, these top 3 ones right here. These are questions that you commonly see in any type of survey, right? They're there a lot. You might even think like, if I'm making a screener survey or any type of survey, we should lead with a little demographic background, facts about the person, where they live. I picked a couple here that are, I think, the most common, but by no means all of them. These questions, most of the time, are not get included in a screener survey, but are not actually going to get you any closer to the right people. Now, there might be scenarios where age is a really important aspect of who you want to interview. Maybe marital status or household income. If you're working on a product for budgeting, maybe household income or salary or something like that is an important screener survey. But if we were to look at these ones right here, and then go back to our criteria down here, our includes, excludes, we can't tie any of these questions back to our include or exclude criteria. They're just filler. We're throwing them in when they really don't have an impact on who we want to interview. If our goal is to learn about someone training for a marathon for the first time, is it going to matter what their household income is? It could, right? We could come up with a scenario where it could. But is this question really going to be critical where we say, wow, if someone makes this much money, they're going to be excluded from our survey. If they make anything under this amount, they're going to be included. It's not going to have much of an impact, yet a lot of times these questions get thrown in just by default, even though they really can't tie back to your include, exclude criteria. Another common culprit, which I think, let's see, one of the questions in the chat was about this one. So Michael, that answers hopefully your age-specific one. But maybe Becky, I think this could relate to yours with close people, close friends that support them. Another way that screener surveys can get bloated is by asking the actual interview questions in the screener survey. Again, we want to really decouple our research from our screener. Yes, you can use surveys as a way to collect data about your users, as a way to analyze or understand their behavior, pain points more. Surveys can be used for that. But if we're talking specifically about screener surveys, this is a really common mistake that can lead to a lot of confusion downstream. If you're including interview style questions, things that you should be asking in the interview or the usability test, there's a high likelihood that you want to take those out. The best way I can describe this is that if you're getting screener survey results back and you're already analyzing their answers beyond just should we include them in this study, then your screener has gone too far, right? So we want to save these questions. These are deep dive questions. If we ask someone, why did they decide to run a marathon? What were your biggest challenges when training? We don't want their quick open text answer that they're jotting down in a few seconds and using shorthand and bullet points. We want to get follow-up questions on that. We want to deep dive into their motivations, their challenges, what got them started, what gave them the idea that they wanted to run a marathon after never running before or seeing someone else do it. We want to do that in the interview, right? If you're seeing questions like this in your screener survey, there's a good chance that you want to take those out save them for the actual interview, keep your screener survey nice and lean, and save all those deep dive questions for a face-to-face or whatever Zoom or Lyssna conversation about them with the actual person. Amanda said here, so you're saying we could ask the demographic info during the interview rather than the screener survey? Yeah, or you could not ask it at all. The idea is if it doesn't relate to the criteria and your research goal, in our case, understanding the challenges of preparing for your first marathon, do you even need to ask about it? And I'm going a little bit farther and say, I don't want to say you should never ask demographic info, but with these three questions I have here, Amanda, if we're trying to learn about the physical, psychological challenges of training for your first marathon, yes, could this stuff be important? Of course, maybe if we're trying to then deep dive further and say for someone who's in their 50 and over, then it's going to matter. But these questions aren't really going to, or we don't know enough yet to say that these questions are going to matter or have an impact on our study. We're just throwing them in there. You will get asked by stakeholders. Amanda, that's how I know you're really doing this every day. You will get asked by stakeholders when presenting findings. Sure. In that case, you could ask them about it on the interview. You could send a follow-up survey before the actual interview that's, hey, we just want to know a little bit more about you. You're in for the screener, right? So if you got to do it, you got to do it. And if that's something that's going to be important to report back to, but I would also challenge you, even I know how hard this can be with relaying it to stakeholders, but even offering a little bit of that pushback to them and saying, why does it matter? If we're looking for, if they're pressing you for, I don't know, whatever, income or age, you can push back with, why does that matter in relation to their challenges and behavior in training for their first marathon? Maybe you get a good answer from that. Maybe your stakeholders are like, here's why we think it matters. Okay, cool. Then let's include it. But I hear you totally, Amanda. So, if you have to do that, like I said, do it. Try not to let it bloat the screener survey, but also keep that in your back pocket, right? That question you can throw back to a stakeholder and say, sure, I can give you the ages of these people, but let's stay focused on what actually matters here, which is their challenges in preparing for their first marathon. In which case, I would argue that a lot of these demographic questions don't really matter. They might matter, but they shouldn't affect whether we want to interview or hear from these people or not. There are other things that are more important that should disqualify or qualify someone from our research study. The best way, as I've said, to eliminate these questions, and this is a good strategy, Amanda, if you do want to push back on that a little bit, is going back to that includes excludes list. It's really simple. If you do a solid job on that includes excludes list, and more importantly, if you're on the same page as your team or your stakeholders with it, here's who we're interviewing, here's who we're not interviewing, then you can point that to these questions and you can say, hey, look, this is who we're trying to interview. Does this matter for it? And when I said earlier with that includes excludes list at being your foundation, this is the perfect example of it and the absolute best way to cut unnecessary questions from your screener. We have some questions down here. Why did you decide to run a marathon? Does that have to do with this? Does that answer if someone's trained or completed their marathon within the past 2 years, or if they've trained independently? No. So if you have this and you're set on it and agree on it as a team or whatever, as a group of this is who we want to interview, you can always come back to this, whether it's to check yourself and to cut your screener down or to push back or make that case to cut things out of the screener survey. Being able to refer back to an agreed upon persona or includes excludes list is going to be a really effective way to do it. Here's who we're trying to talk to. Here's who we're not trying to talk to right now, let's say. Does this question affect any of these things? No. Probably a good case to cut that out of the screener survey. We don't need it right now. Maybe we can ask it in the interview, but not important for the screener surveys. Amanda, let me know if that was a helpful answer. I sure hope so. All right, our last one here. So let's just go to this, right? So I would cut all of these questions if I were trying to improve this, and I'll show the final survey with this one, but I cut these and I cut these ones down here, all based on too many questions and too many things that are being asked that are not really relevant to the criteria that we're looking for. All right, let's go on to our last one here. Number 3, vague or confusing questions and answers. If your questions are vague, people are going to guess, people are going to give you vague answers, there's going to be subjectivity involved, and that's going to break your filter. You want to have, if you've done a good job creating your include and exclude criteria, you want to make sure that your questions and the answer choices that you're giving people actually reflect that. So we have a question here, right? When did you train for your first marathon? Select 1. I'm training for it now. I trained recently. I trained more than several years ago. I've never trained for a marathon. It's not the worst question ever, but as we'll see, there's some subjectivity and some wiggle room in this one that could be improved that will help you source participants more effectively. Some of the common culprits of vague or confusing questions. Number 1 is multiple questions bundled up as one. When I've taught classes and workshops on this in the past, and I've given that 3 to 4, 3 to 5 question, what's the word I'm looking for, checkpoint or limit for your screener surveys, I've seen students and other researchers try to mash multiple questions into one. That is going to lead to confusing questions. That's going to lead to confusing answers and basically going to break the whole point of your screener survey, which is to get clear criteria of who should be included and excluded. The other common culprit of vague and confusing questions are questions that are either subjective in what they're asking or are including subjective answer choices. So let's look back at this one right here. The fix being to ask clear, simple questions and offer specific, straightforward answer options. Here's our first one. When did you train for your first marathon? I'm training for it now. I trained recently. I trained more than several years ago. I've never trained for a marathon. Not the worst question ever, but I'd say a realistically bad one or vague one. Mainly, I've trained recently. I've trained more than several years ago. People might be able to give a clear answer to this one, but we're going to have to do some interpreting on our end of their answers to figure out who is in and who is out from our research study. A better question, an improvement on this one. Have you trained or ran your first marathon within the past 2 years? Yes, I'm currently training for my first marathon. Yes, I've trained for and run my first marathon within the past 2 years. No, I ran my first marathon more than 2 years ago. No, I've never trained for or run a marathon. We could maybe improve this one a little bit too, but it's clear answer choices here. It's a clear question. It's time boxed. Instead of saying recently, we're saying within the past 2 years. That's leaving no room for interpretation here. So if we want relevant experience from our participants, if we want to hear people who have a fresh memory of training for and running their first marathon, and we decide, hey, maybe that's within the past 2 years, let's just say that in the screener. Instead of saying recently or in the past or a while ago, let's keep it super, super straightforward, both with the language we're using in our question, the options that we're giving for our choices, and the time boxes or the specifics, in this case, a time frame of the experience that we're looking for. So with these vague questions, vague answers, number 1, try to get it down to a simple question at a time. Don't try to mash too many questions together. Use clear, straightforward language. And if there is any room for interpretation in it, like recently, see if you can improve that with something dead simple, super straightforward that people are going to understand. And more importantly, that you and your team are going to understand as a way to include them or exclude them from the study. So you're not looking at these responses and thinking, oh, Jane said she trained recently. Should we include her? Keep it really simple. If it's in the past 2 years, yes, you're in. If it's not, no, you're not. If you've never trained for a marathon, then we're not going to spend time interviewing you to learn about your marathon training experience. Really simple, really straightforward. And the common theme with this and a lot of the stuff we've talked about, trimming down on the areas that might cause confusion, that might cause subjectivity or wiggle room, and making it almost like clinically extremely straightforward and blunt in a lot of ways. So your participants are clear on their questions and answers, and you're clear about who you want to spend your time interviewing and taking feedback from beyond the screener survey. Okay, so this one here, I'll just show you this example since we got about less than 10 minutes left, but you could do this one for homework. I left you some blank space here. How did you train for your marathon? I'd say this is an example of kind of a vague, maybe the question isn't as vague, but the answers by myself, with others, with some help, a coach helped me. And maybe you were going to say, this is going to lead to problems, right? Because if you say with some help, and our criteria is we don't want to talk to people who have been part of a structured running club or something like that. We're going to get these answers back. We're going to see people who have clicked with some help, and we're going to have to decide on our own, what does that mean? Should they be included? Should they be excluded? Again, a lot of wiggle room here and a lot of ambiguity about the question and the answer. That's going to lead to ambiguity about who we want to talk to in our interviews. So I'll show you how I improved this one. What resources or support did you use during your training? Running fitness apps, select all that apply here. Straightforward, simple question and answer. Running fitness apps, a professional running coach. Maybe this makes us, disqualify right here. My fake jam skill's not really working today. Let's see. Nope, too much. Strike that out, right? That could be a disqualify, structured running group or club. That's a disqualify, friends or family, trained on my own, online resources. Everything else is going to qualify for it. So we're asking a more straightforward question, giving more simple, straightforward answers, and more importantly, however we wanted to structure this, we're able to easily see these answers, and without any debate, discussion, back and forth, we're able to say, yes, this person meets our criteria. We want to interview them. No, this person doesn't meet our criteria. We want to shift our focus or spend our time interviewing people and taking feedback from people who do, right? Who have only used, let's say, a running app or casual friends and family or help in preparing to train for their marathon. All right, so since we're about at time here, I'm going to go through a quick bonus section, and then we will do a super short wrap up with some key takeaways, a little checklist, and get you guys out of here to enjoy the rest of your day. Good question, Elaine. I'll get to that in a second. Another thing that I want to highlight is we focused a lot today on writing good screener questions, making sure that we have a clear idea of our target audience, making sure that we don't have too many questions and we're trimming the ones that don't really relate to our criteria, and making sure that our questions are straightforward, clear, and easy for us to parse of who we want in and out of our survey. But some other things that you want to include in a good screener survey are some of the details surrounding the question. Basically, some ways to create a good participant experience outside of just the questions that you're asking them. So some other good things to include in a screener survey: the goals of the study, the time commitment, the compensation that you're offering, privacy, logistics. And if you look at the improved one in your template up here, you'll see I have all of this, and you can use this as a template for it. It's giving the goal of the study. It's saying that it will be, that one got cut off a little bit, shared with the research team. It's giving some info on compensation. These are all things that don't really have to do with who's screening in and who's screening out, but it's going to set you in the spirit of this whole workshop and this whole recruitment process. It's going to set you up for a smoother research process, not only are you now recruiting the right people with improved questions, but you're also setting the expectations for the study so that when people get on with you and want to do that interview, they're going to know what to expect and what they should be sharing, and maybe even have some ideas beforehand. It's going to reduce things like tech problems. It's going to reduce things like, oh, I didn't know that's what we were talking about here. A lot of other things that can create hiccups in the recruitment or research process are going to be eliminated if you can set the right expectations in your screener survey, give a little context, and basically introduce people into the purpose of this screener survey and what they're opting into if they want to be a part of it. Okay, let me share this example. These are some good questions in the chat, so I want to get to these. The last thing in terms of creating a good screener survey experience or a good recruitment experience, I'll share a personal example. This is a screenshot from an app called FreshBooks. Basically, FreshBooks is a platform for freelancers to send invoices, stuff like that. I've used it for a really long time. I got an email probably like a year ago that had a screener survey from FreshBooks, and it said, hey, we're looking to interview people about how you use FreshBooks to invoice clients, stuff like that. And I thought, what the heck, let me fill it out and I'll be part of this research study. I can tell you, just based on the screener survey questions, they were really good questions. And I could also pretty confidently say, although I don't know this for sure, that I would be a really good participant. I would have I did screen into this study, and I would have been a really good participant. Based on the criteria it looked like they were looking for, I probably would have been a good person to interview. So I opted into it. And when it came, I got an email that scheduled the interview with someone, a researcher from FreshBooks. And when it came time to do the interview, no one showed up. I had to look for the link of where I was supposed to join. I didn't know exactly. There were some time zone issues. I was basically volunteering my time. I think they were offering compensation, so not totally volunteering it. But I was saying, okay, I'm in, I'm screening in, I'm the right person to talk to. I'm going to give valuable feedback on this, or the best feedback that I can. And when I showed up for the interview, no one was there. And in addition to that, leading up to it, I wasn't really sure about the scheduling, the time, the process. I just blindly showed up and hoped someone was there, which they weren't. Now, this isn't to rip FreshBooks or anything like that, but what I want to also emphasize in this idea of a smooth participant recruitment experience is that, again, it's not just all about the questions. If you have a great screener, but no follow-up, if there's a missed interview, if people don't know what to expect going into it, that is going to lead to some frustration, a bad brand moment, which it was for FreshBooks, even though I still really like it a lot. And it's going to lead to more issues with your research, no-shows, confusing interview responses, stuff that's going to lead you astray from the actual purpose of understanding, in this case, how people invoice clients and use FreshBooks to manage their finances. So one thing I want to highlight is, in addition to screener surveys, Lyssna has these features built in. Emails that follow up with people once they screen into your study, that give clear direction on where to be, when to be, an introduction to what the topic of the interview is. All of these kind of admin tasks that honestly suck to do manually, but that make a really big difference in your participants showing up feeling comfortable, confident, ready to give you good feedback versus feeling shaky, unsure, or potentially, like in this case, getting ghosted when they volunteered their time to do it. Topic of today's workshop was all about the questions and the screener survey, but I wanted to talk about this just at the end and include it in that Fig Jam so you can see and take some time to digest after this workshop about some of the other aspects of a good recruitment experience outside of just the screener survey questions. All right, so let me get to some questions here in the chat. If you guys don't mind sticking around for five more minutes, I'll answer some of these questions and then wrap up and send you guys on your way. Let's say Elaine said, thoughts about the order of questions in the survey. That's a good question. I think I'm going to give an obvious answer here. I don't think it matters that much unless you're building off of the question before it. There are also instances where you could use like branching logic if you wanted to say, if they answer yes to this question, show them this question, that obviously would affect the order of it. I don't really have any great tips outside of just the obvious ones that if a question is based on the one before that would affect the order that much. And I'd say my main point is if you're doing a good job of cutting it down to a few simple questions, in most cases, the order isn't going to matter as much. And if it does, you'll probably spot that pretty quickly. I'd say my only other piece of advice there would be like start with, if the order truly doesn't matter in terms of questions leading to other questions, start with simple, easy to answer questions, a quick multiple choice one, maybe followed by a open text question towards the end. But I would say in most cases, if you do a good job of cutting down the amount of questions in the study, the order is not going to matter that much. And I would have to, maybe I could find an example, Elaine, of one that would be a good example of this. But in most cases, if you can do that, I don't have any super relevant tips or tricks that are going to drastically affect it, depending on the order. Again, outside of just an obvious, if one question's based on the one before it, you want them to go in that order. So it doesn't matter that much. Lou, what's the ideal number for screening questions? As few as possible, and I would say 5 max. Like I said, Lyssna limits you to 4. You should be able to you should be able to get it down to that. And I think 3 is really the sweet spot. Do you vary your approach if it's design tests or surveys rather than interviews? Any considerations? Good question, Kiri. I think the types of questions you would ask, maybe for a short answer, is no, right? The approach is, everything we covered here is going to be the same, whether it's these rules of thumb or best practices are going to be the same, regardless of the study that they're opting in for. It's really just going to be the content of the questions that might change. Maybe for a lighter study, you might have, I shouldn't even say, I was going to say maybe for a lighter study, you might have some lighter criteria, but that's really just saying it's case by case. But short answer is no. You want to keep it short. Regardless of what study you're running, you want to get the right people for it. And the things that I showed you here are going to help you get the right people for it. And that's not going to change regardless of what the study is about or the method that you're using. You want to keep it short. You don't want to overload it with too many questions. You don't want to put interview questions or usability test questions in the screener. And you don't want to have vague or confusing questions. And that's going to be across the board. Yes, you can reuse screeners in Lyssna. Yep. Cool. All right, everybody. So to wrap up, here's a little checklist for everyone. When you're doing your next screener survey, do you know who you want to talk to? If you have a lightweight persona, you can use that to create your include excludes list. That's your first step. That's your anchor for everything that you're doing going forward. Do that first. Make sure you and your team know who you want to talk to. And if you have that includes excludes list, you can refer back to it over and over again to make sure that your questions are on point, and you can adjust it if you feel like, hey, we need to maybe loosen up on this criteria or tighten it up as you get some responses in. Do all the questions help qualify people in or out? Again, using your includes excludes list or qualify disqualify list as a foundation, go back to that, look at it. If you have 10 screener questions, look at that criteria and see if there's anything that can be cut. Are there any questions in there that don't directly relate to it? That's why I drew an arrow from this to this, right? Literally do it this way, right? You're like, okay, this is criteria, what question, maybe do it reverse, right? Here's a question. What piece of criteria does this tie back to? If it's none of these, that's probably a good sign that you can cut that question. Are the questions short, specific, and easy to understand? And are you saving the rich answers, the rich questions for the actual session, especially if you're doing an interview. I know we packed a lot into this hour and 7 minutes here, but I wanted to leave you with this checklist at the end. Covers everything. Refer back to these slides. But if you can do these things that I'm showing right here and run through that checklist on your own, starting with that foundation of your persona or your includes excludes criteria, that is going to make a massive difference in the quality of your screener surveys and everything that comes out of it. It's going to save you a lot of wasted time in potential research and synthesis from talking to the wrong people. All right, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining, and keep an eye out for some upcoming workshops soon. All right. See you later, everybody. Have a good one.